Hey guys, enjoy this upcoming episode with Jason Creel of The Lawn Care Life and Alabama Lawn Pros. This is an awesome episode. We dive into fertilizer and turf management 101. Jason's a great guy. Also, we have a ton of Turf Nerds stickers. They're for free. If you want one, shoot me an email. turfnerdspodcast@proton.me.
You've got mail.
Also, can't forget Ezra McCarthy over at Green Frog Web Design is running a special $99 for a single solo operator lawn care website. It's awesome. It's sweet. Highly encourage you guys to take advantage of that. And finally, if you guys are going to the Equip Expo, use the Turf Nerds promo code. If you don't, Greg is going to paint the interior of your house dark green.
Okay, Kentucky Blue, yeah.
Hey, it's Aaron with the Mowing in the Dark Lawn Care Podcast.
Hey, this is Tony's Lawn Care Talk.
Hey guys, Cameron here with the Lawn Care Life in Missouri.
Hey guys, this is Dan White with Lawn Care Unscripted.
What up guys, it's Phil with Phil's Lawn Care.
And you're listening to the Turf Nerds.
We're going to crash right into it. Greg and I have been trying to get a fert guy on the show for a while. I've always thought lawn fertilization, turf management has been fascinating, and we got the one and the only Jason Creel. You guys probably know him, but for those who don't know him, kind of Jason, give the background about the Alabama Lawn Pros and how you got into your YouTube channel. Sorry to do this again, but the floor is yours.
Well, second time will only be better than the first, hopefully. But no, thank you first for having me on the show. I enjoy doing these kind of things. And yeah, I think I'm in my 18th year in lawn care. I'm in Alabama. Hence the name Alabama Lawn Pros. And the funny thing, I have people call me. I get calls all over Alabama saying, can you come spray my yard? And they don't know I'm a one-man show that lives in a small town, Alabama. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't cover the whole state, basically. But I named it big in case I accidentally became big one day, but it hadn't worked so far. But no, I've been doing this for a while. I used to mow grass, and 10 or 11 years ago, I started to switched over. Well, for two or 3 years there, I was trying to do both mowing and spraying, and then I was like, wait a minute, I'm just going to go spraying route. There's a lot less people doing that, and I don't know. I guess for me, a lot of it was just wanting to change of pace, just to try something different and a new challenge. And then we were talking about being on YouTube. That's my main platform where I've been on there for, I think since 2011. So pretty good while. And I had a friend that was a real estate agent. He was talking about he gets most of his leads to sell houses on the internet. Now this was, I guess, in 2011. So not that the internet wasn't invented then, but it wasn't quite as common to be focused on internet leads then. So I guess he was ahead of the curve, if you will. And he said, hey man, you need to start making videos. It'll help your business, come from an SEO standpoint. So he let me borrow his camera. I set him in the backyard. He told me at the time, I don't think it's true anymore, but he said at the time, 10 mediocre videos would be better than one good video. I disagree with that strategy now to some degree, but I took that mediocre to heart, and I made some really mediocre videos and started posting. But nobody else was, I'm not saying nobody was doing it, but there was very little competition on YouTube for the lawn care space in 2011. So whatever you put out there, probably did fine. And so that's kind of how I got my start doing all this.
Well, you got in early, Jason. It's kind of a niche with lawn spraying, and Greg and I have some questions. Greg, you want to lead off with kind of lawn fertilizer 101. We're cutters. You can make fun of us all the time. We go around, we scalp, we cut too low. At least Greg and I have gotten knocked up here up in Michigan. I cut them on 3, and then I have my clients who have these fert companies. They'll write notes to my clients saying I cut it too low. I'm like, this lawn's not brown, and they try to challenge me and say my blades are not dull when I sharpen every 8 to 12 hours. But Greg, why don't you lead off here with this first question, Greg, about the foundation of lawn fertilizer. It's going to be a good 101 class.
All right. We a lot of times, Jason, we talk about fertilizer, and there's 3 big fertilizers: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And can you explain what each one does in simple lawn terms for us? And I think a lot of guys know about nitrogen, but what about the other stuff? But explain all 3 of them.
Yeah, I can do that. The other, I was going to say the mowing thing, the weed control people like to figure out how to blame it on the mowing crew. The mowing crew likes to figure out on the weed control. If it turns brown, it's of course the other person's fault that did it. So So you might hear it called NPK. And so if you're talking about the nitrogen, that's the one that we talk about the most. And I'm basically regurgitating a lot of stuff. I'm not an agronomist by trade. I consider myself just have basic knowledge and experience together and kill stuff. But I do have a friend that I've learned a lot from. So the nitrogen is kind of the big one that people talk about. That's going to be your first number on the bag of fertilizer. And when you talk about nitrogen, it's basically what makes the grass grow, what kind of gives it that deep green color or improves the color. Y'all's grasses in Michigan seems to be green if you don't do anything to it, but ours down here, it needs a lot of help. So we're pumping the nitrogen to it. And the phosphorus, my understanding is that has more to do with the rooting of the plant. So you'll see sometimes you'll get like a starter fertilizer if somebody resodded their yard, and it'll have a high mil number to help it with the rooting. And then you got the potassium, and that is more to do with like overall turf health. They'll talk about wear tolerance, winter, ability to survive winter, drought, stress, all this stuff overall. I don't know, you kind of vitamins for yourself and building up your immune system if you want to make a correlation to humans. So that's on a basic level, that's my understanding without a science background myself.
Well, that's a great, simple way to put it in terms to put it. It's funny, you talked about earlier how the cutters and the fert guys kind of go back and forth on the blame game. I was furious because I had this company that I kind of knew, and I kept referring my lawn clients to them, and then they had the gall. The lawn client came out with notes from the fert company saying I was cutting too low, and it just drove me nuts. I came half close to calling them saying, "Hey, buddy, I've been referring you business, and I make the stripes look good." But that's hilarious. So now we talk about like fertilizer bags too, Jason, and I've sprayed my lawn myself a little bit here and there, but now I have a different buddy who does it, and you see on the bags where it says 10 10 10 or 25 to 10. Those numbers, is that like the first number, is that like nitrogen, and the second one phosphorus, and then the third one potassium? Like, why is it broken down like that? Because you obviously spray, you're more on the commercial, and so you buy it all in bulk. Is that kind of the same principle, like even for smaller fertilizer bags?
Yeah, I mean, what the number is actually, you're right, that's your NPK, those three numbers, but it's actually the percentage that's in the bag. So one of the simple ways to do it, most of the time you buy a bag of fertilizer, it's in a 50-pound bag. So let's just say you use the first number, 25, as an example. There's 25% nitrogen in a 50-pound bag. Well, one of the easy ways to figure out, well, how much nitrogen is in the bag? If it's a 50-pound bag, all you got to do is divide the numbers by 2. So if it's 25% in a 50-pound bag, that means there's 12.5 pounds of nitrogen in that bag. So you just divide by 10, that makes it simple. And the reason that's important is because oftentimes you're making an application, you want to know how much nitrogen to put out per 1,000 square feet, let's say. And so if I'm going for 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, and I know the bag has 12.5 pounds of nitrogen, then a little bit of math, I can figure out how far this bag will go, for that particular lawn.
Wow, I never knew it like that. I mean, Greg, you know me, Greg. I'm not the best with math, am I?
No, I'm not going to touch that. I know you're not good at hitting recording buttons, but
no, I'm not. No, that's a good one.
But okay, well, that's interesting. And then, so you had mentioned earlier that the potassium. So in the winter, when it's time when we're starting to hit the winter, so is that when you're going to increase the potassium? That's going to be higher?
Well,
because you talked about the immune system. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm maybe touching on some future stuff. And anybody who's listening to this that wants to correct me, because like I said, I know this stuff on a certain level, but I'm sure there's some scientists out there who could explain this in more detail. But it's going to depend largely on, this is where we're going to differ, with you guys being in Michigan with cool season grasses, me being in Alabama with warm season grasses. So it's going to be a lot different strategy as far as when to apply the fertilizer. So yeah, I know a lot of cool season people will put fertilizer out in the falls to kind of boost your lawn up and get it ready for winter. And perhaps it'll carry over into the spring and give you a second little boost. Where for us, we don't do that. We're not fertilizing our lawns in the fall hardly ever, or I certainly don't. I don't think many of my competitors do. So it has a lot to do with the growing season. So like on a cool season lawn, people are going to probably, in my understanding, you'd fertilize in the spring and in the fall when it's really growing. In the summer, it's kind of just hanging on for dear life with the heat. For us, it's more late spring and the summer is our max growing season. So we're going to fertilize then. And an idea being, if the grass is not really growing, it's not taking up those nutrients. So it's not really benefiting from the fertilizer.
I didn't know that at all. You touched a little bit on nitrogen earlier on, Jason. I think, not getting too ahead, but there's some fert companies, at least up here, you have some guys that spray like 7 to 10 times a season, and they think it's kind of funny to dump a whole bunch of nitrogen on the cutters when it's growing. And then Greg, we've showed up and we're triple and quadruple cutting. How much is really too much for, I guess, the nitrogen? Because that's what makes it I guess grow and look green. And then you have some other clients though too that they pay for a fert service, and guess what? They don't get it watered, and it just sits on there and browns right up.
Yeah, so that's a big. I deal with that with the mower guys. Sometimes they're like, "Hey, man, go easy on the fertilizer. We don't want to have to mow it too much, But our grass doesn't grow like a cool season. Well, I know in the spring y'all just goes crazy, I think it again, a lot of it is going to depend on your specific grass type, and like for instance. Let's give you an example. I'm more familiar with our warm season turf, but on a Bermuda lawn, you can really pump the nitrogen to it because, they literally grow it for hay to feed the cows and stuff, So, if you want to grow Bermuda grass and just really pump the nitrogen, you can. Where my understanding is on a zoysia lawn, once you get past 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, it really doesn't improve the quality of the turf anymore. So it wouldn't make sense. But you made another point about burning the turf, and you kind of alluded to spraying a liquid fertilizer. And sometimes that our fertilizer is very salty, so when you spray it, especially in hot weather, if it's a liquid fertilizer, it can burn the turf if it sits on there. And that's why a lot of times, if I can allude to just the liquid versus granular kind of stuff, on the liquid, you don't put quite as much nitrogen out at a time, and then it doesn't last as long. So they may come 7 times and do it. Where on a granular, you can put more nitrogen on there, and it's not going to sit on the leaf of the grass. It's going to fall down to the soil, and so it's less likely to cause burn to the grass. So that's kind of one difference in why people use granular versus liquid.
That's great. You tied in some of our future questions. I know you had a question here. The next one here, maybe you already touched on it. It was number 5 there of our first heading, Greg, or whatever you got, Greg.
Yeah, I think he's already kind of touched on these, and the time of year when you cover the spring and the fall, which nutrients you put in more. So I apologize, I jumped, but you already kind of referred to that a little bit. So we can kind of move on to some of the next questions.
Yeah, maybe I could elaborate just a little bit more on that, but if I could. But other thing you'll notice, why are we pumping more nitrogen than we are phosphorus or potassium? A lot of times the middle number will be 0 or 1. I know you mentioned a 13, 13, 13. And that's a lot of agriculture. And I think the idea is that a lot of soils hold some of the nutrients more than others. Where the nitrogen is going to burn through that, it's not going to hold in the soil. So you got to replenish that regularly. Where the phosphorus, may hang around in the soil a lot longer. And so especially if they've been pumping up 13, 13, 13, and if they'd probably plenty of phosphorus available in the soil. That's the way I understand that. But yeah, the liquid versus granular, if I can say one more thing about that, is a lot of times it comes down to convenience. If I spray a liquid fertilizer, I can also mix in a herbicide with it at the same time. On a granular, you're usually not doing that, though you can get a pre-emergent attached to your granular sometimes. But it also comes down to the longevity of it. So I use granular typically because I use a slow release granular. I'm wanting it to last for months, where a liquid is typically not going to last that long, because if you put that much nitrogen on it, you cause more risk of burning the turf.
So with that being said, okay, all right, Jason, I want to fertilize my lawn here. Okay, I'm in a ranch house, 11,000 square foot here. See guys on YouTube, like, okay, if I wanted to do it myself, like, what are the first steps? I know there's other YouTube sprayers and guys who say to get like soil testing or just kind of eyeball it, and this kind of like links into like how much is too much for putting down fertilizer, because I see guys do it and it's like, oh, I don't want to burn out my lawn. So I just started like putting like, what's this, like, I guess the math behind like measuring by this, like the square footage. If a, beginner homeowner wanted to do it, what would you push and recommend for them to do?
Yeah. I mean, we rarely do soil tests, but I know there's some people that say, oh, you should never start without a soil test, because that's going to tell you exactly what to do. Here's my understanding of why sometimes the soil testing, two reasons why you might get back and talk you out of doing it. Not that it's a terrible idea, but usually what we do is put out our regular plan on the lawn, and if it doesn't work, then let's go look at a soil test. But 99.9% of the time, it's going to improve the lawn and it worked. I don't know if I've ever seen a lawn that I took on that it was, that I was like, oh, the fertilizer didn't make the grass grow. I need to get a soil test. And if the one, maybe one, it comes to mind, and it was one of those deals where they're building a neighborhood and they're basically throwing the sod down on top of a gravel pit and hope it grows, because they stripped all the topsoil out. And it's just visible rocks all in the yard. And it was a tiny yard, and they ended up resodding the thing. But unfortunately, I asked them, they just resodded. I said, did you bring in any dirt when you resodded? They said, no, the sod had some dirt on the bottom. I thought, oh, man, I wish you'd have brought in like just a little bit of dirt. So we're back to putting it on rocks again, but we'll hopefully do a little bit. So that's one thing. The other thing about the soil testing that I've been told is when you get a soil test, okay, you send your dirt off and then they run it for some numbers. They're going to come back with some recommendations. And they can say, oh, you need to put this much nitrogen, this much phosphorus, this much. And what I've been told is that a lot of that data that they're running the numbers against is very old data that could possibly come from World War II times and possibly be heavily influenced by the agricultural industry. So think about that. Again, we talked about Bermuda grass, growing it for hay. And if they come back and say, oh, you need this much nitrogen, this much phosphorus, and this much potassium, but it's old data, old science that could be used for agriculture. It's not necessarily modern science that is for your particular lawn. So I think sometimes they make a lot, maybe recommend a lot more than you actually need in reality. Unfortunately, I can't make specific recommendations for cool season lawns as far as how much nitrogen they need and all that, because I'm just not familiar with it. On warm season grasses, I'm familiar with those. We typically hover around somewhere around 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Again, Bermuda could handle double or triple that and be fine. Zoysia, centipede, St. Augustine, we're kind of that 2 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. And on centipede, they recommend don't go over 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet because it could, actually damage the lawn.
So, just as an aside, so you have to carry bunches of different fertilizer around with you then, possibly, if you have for the different grasses then, or is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I try not to, but you do have some. Yeah, that's part of the trick with, especially if you live in like what we call a transition zone, like where you've got cool season and warm season grasses. Now you're really in a tricky spot with your herbicide and also your fertilizer, because it's just different schedule and everything. I mean, we do a couple of things. One, I have like a split tank on my truck, so I have two sides to the tank. So if I'm out spraying weeds, I got one side set up for centipede St. Augustine, which are very similar. Another side set up for Bermuda zoysia, which is similar. And I'm sure they do similar things in the cool season world. Or it may be even more similar there where you don't have to do that. Same thing with fertilizer. Like I use the same fertilizer on the Bermuda and zoysia lawns I could crank the rate up a little bit on the Bermuda if I wanted to pump more nitrogen on there. I could use the same on the Centipede and St. Augustine and dial it back if I wanted less nitrogen. But in those situations, I actually just use a totally different blend. So, and for the most part, when I'm out in the summer fertilizing, I've got 2 blends, one for Centipede, St. Augustine, one for Bermuda Soja. So it's not overly complicated.
And you already know which lawn you got, so you know what you're going to use for the lawn that's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, you want to definitely avoid the customer, maybe sometimes a little bit of a red flag when they ask for a soil test, if they think that we're giving some sort of custom plan for every hundreds of customers we got. Like, okay, well, this one, I got to order 1 bag of this fertilizer for your yard. And what is it? No, we ain't doing all that. We have a quality products for sure, but we're not customizing everything for every person out there.
Okay. You mentioned liquid and granular, and guys do it in it himself. Do you still recommend the granular for most people then, and then the liquid? What would you recommend if somebody wanted to try liquid?
Yeah, like I said, in the South, almost nobody uses liquid in my area. Occasionally, I would see somebody do it in the springtime when the grass is barely turning green, and they wanted to they're out there spraying weeds, and they wanted to put some liquid nitrogen in there just to give it a little kick start, start growing. The problem is if it's still cold in the spring, you don't ever know what kind of weather. It might be 75, it might be 40, Well, if it's 40, our grass is barely doing anything, and you sort of wasted your money, if you will. So for those 2 reasons I mentioned, like mostly, in my opinion, for the longevity of it, our growing season, I'm trying to feed the lawn from April to September, possibly May to September. I need it to last for months. So if I'm going to do liquid, I got to liquid and come back and do liquid again and come back and do liquid again, and if I do a slow release granular, I could literally fertilize it one time. Golf courses do this. They'll put their fertilizer out in February when everything's brown around here, and they'll do it. But it's a slow release. It sits there on the lawn. As the weather warms, it starts releasing the nutrients. And depending on the rate you put it out at, you can actually feed the lawn for the whole growing season with one application. So where, again, comparing that with a cool season lawn, you almost have my understanding, 2 growing seasons. You got the spring and the fall. So, and they're shorter. So you could put a liquid out in the spring and give it a boost of nitrogen, and you could put a liquid out in the fall and give it a second boost. And then again, another thing we mentioned was y'all's grass just looks greener anyway. If you didn't do anything to it, it looks pretty green. If we don't put nitrogen on you got to really pump the nitrogen to our lawns to make them have a decent color to it. So it's kind of a real different situation with warm season versus cool season.
That's a great answer, Jason. Okay, a couple questions here. A pre-question here is, where's kind of the transition zone from that cool season to warm? Is it like Tennessee, Kentucky area? I mean, we're way up here in Michigan, so we have Kentucky blue. And then on top of that is, how often should really a client, or, someone who signs up with you, what do you push and recommend for a service? Because you could try to lock someone in for 7 to 9 sprays a year, get more money doing that, or just go into 4 to 5 sprays, but then get more clientele. I guess, please correct me if I'm wrong, the physical labor in spraying is probably nearly not as backbreaking as us out there riding a mower all day and weed whipping. Please correct me there if I'm wrong. And then, is there a schedule? I mean, you deal with more of the warm season grasses, but it still has to be pretty simple with schedules and how many apps per year, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the truest thing you said all day. And not that the other things weren't true, but that it's physically less abusive on your body. I mean, the mowing was wear you out. And
we thought we'd eventually get to the truth here somehow, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was. I certainly come home with a little more pep in my step after, and I can spray 25 yards a day and mowing. I can't do that, and that's by myself. I feel like I like to tell you, I'm basically a security guard at the mall. I'm out there riding around with my little moped thing, fertilizing or spraying. I mean, it's on a nice day, it's pretty enjoyable job. What was, I'm sorry about the first part. I got the second part about how many apps. What was the first thing you asked me?
Sorry, the transition zone. Greg could tell you
yeah.
I do this. I pile on questions and people are like, I don't remember the first one. So.
Yeah, well,
Evan's a bundler, a question bundler.
Yeah, so where I'm in Birmingham, Alabama market, and we have almost no cool season lawns. If somebody plants it, it's not going to survive the summer. But if you were to go 2 hours north of me in Huntsville, Alabama, which is at the northern end of the state, you would start to see some cool season lawns, but it would be rare, and they may have to really baby them to get them through the summertime because it's hot. But as you get into Tennessee and Kentucky, for sure, and I would say probably in Kentucky, my guess is you're going to see more cool season than warm season. So there's that line there. Definitely, in my mind, which I live close, I'm in the South. Tennessee's like the epitome of the transition zone. I feel like you could go either way. But again, from a lawn care perspective, that would be a challenge because you're doing, sure enough, two totally different things if you have warm season and cool season lots. And to answer the question about the number of apps, I mean, there's a business side to it for sure, but then there's also what does the lawn actually need? And I try to not just take people's money just to come out there another time. I mean, I'm pretty big on that. So I've landed on 7 applications. In the South, 7 to 9 is pretty common. I would say 8's probably the most common. If I was to start a business today, I would probably recommend somebody do 8. From not just from a business standpoint, it falls great on a calendar. Our schedule lasts the whole year. So 8 falls pretty neatly on the calendar. I do 7 because that's what I've been doing, and I basically want to keep some flexibility in my schedule. If I went to 8, I would lose some of my own personal freedom, I guess you'd say. A cool season, there's nothing to do in the winter when there's snow all over the grass. So I think it is more common to have less apps. I don't know, 5 is the magic number. I'm not exactly sure. I think my understanding is all the times the cool season market, they're able to charge a little bit more. Down here, people doing 7 or 8, it can be pretty competitive. But yeah, it's balancing what does the grass need and then also the business. So the way that works is we talked about fertilizer. You can, same thing with herbicide. You can fertilize one time with a very expensive fertilizer at a very heavy rate and feed the lawn the whole year. Or you could come out and do it 4 times and put the same amount of nitrogen on there and bill them 4 times. The customer doesn't typically know. I typically fertilize twice. This year, I'm actually going to 1 time. And up for other reasons, but yeah, but you got to think of other things. You really got to focus on the weeds because most times you get fired, it's over the weeds, not because it wasn't quite green enough. And then last year we just had insect problems like crazy. It could be anything from spittle bugs in a centipede lawn to last year the chinch bugs were really bad in our zoysia lawns. We've had armyworm breakouts 2 of the last 3 years. So I had to put in an insecticide in the program because you can have no weeds and be green, and then a little insect that you can barely see just comes and wrecks the whole yard. And for our grasses, you can't just like overseed it in the fall and it look good again. It's like, okay, what are we going to do? Resaw it or wait months for it to fill back in?
Yeah, that's tough when you see those bugs coming in. It's just and then determining which bug it is. How do you determine that? You get you just dig it up and find the bug, or you by the pattern?
It's typically the symptoms of the lawn. So a chinch bug, for instance, you can see them. They're tiny, and you got to get down on your hands and knees and dig around in the dirt. And he's he found one. But the symptom there, it kind of looks like drought stress. And you're like, well, wait a minute. We've had plenty of rain, or wait a minute, they got irrigation. Why is their lawns turning brown? Wait, I think it's a chinch bug. So you better catch it early because they could actually kill lawn. Armyworms, I mean, you're going to see hundreds, if not thousands of armyworms on the yard. Your lawn look like it's moving sometimes. They're just out there eating the Bermuda grass. So they're pretty easy. Spittle bugs they're free. You can just see them. Grub damage is pretty tricky because they're underground, but it's almost like the turf. It's like a piece of sod that's been laid there with no roots. Like there's the grass, and I can just reach down and pick it up like carpet almost. So that's bad. So we just sort of build in the grub control, because that's the hidden assassin that could get your lawn and you don't ever see it.
Okay. So actually, this might tie in with a little bit of that. You see people making mistakes here and there with fertilizer. What are the most common mistakes? How do you avoid them? And then secondarily, are you transferring insects to other lawns?
Well, I don't know if you would transform by a lawnmower. Now, I'm not sure. I get that question a lot about like weeds. Am I carrying the weeds from my lawnmower blades under the deck to the next one that I mow? And I say, well, maybe there's a seed on there somewhere. But if I'm doing my weed control job right, it shouldn't matter. I can show you the neighbor's yard is covered in weeds, almost like you could draw a straight line. There's like all weeds, no weeds. So I look at that as my job, not the mower guy's job to blow his deck off every time. Though I wouldn't blame him if he did. But I don't know on the fertilizer. I guess I can tie in the herbicide here too. To me, it's just like the timing of it is big. People think from a weed control standpoint that you just go buy any product at the big box store and it says weed control on here, so I'm just spraying, it should kill all the weeds. So they don't understand there's lots of types of weeds. One product may kill one weed and do absolutely nothing for the other weed. Or if it's a pre-emergent, especially the timing of that application makes all the difference in the world. If I sprayed Prodiamine, which is a common pre-emergent, if I sprayed that a month ago in Alabama, and on a yard that was covered in crabgrass last year, I would have virtually no crabgrass this year. If I spray it tomorrow, I'm basically too late. The crabgrass likely germinated a week or two ago, a lot of it. And so the Prodiamine is going to be essentially ineffective on existing crabgrass that's already germinated, even if it's tiny. So it's all about the timing. And sometimes I get mad at the TV commercials because they start advertising their products on there. Go spray your lawn with this and it'll be in the springtime. I was like, if you're in Michigan, yes, spray that now. If you're in Alabama, you should have did it a month ago because you're too late and it's not going to work. You're going to be disappointed. So I guess with the fertilizer, same thing. I mean, understanding those three numbers we talked about probably helps. It's not just, sometimes people go with the price of the bag. Oh, this one's cheaper. This one's more expensive. Well, I would challenge you to do a little bit of math and figure out what is if I buy a 13% nitrogen or a 38% nitrogen, well, one of them has almost triple the nitrogen on it. And it costs, 50% more. It's like, well, yeah, but you're paying less for the actual nutrients you're getting. You're getting 3 times more nutrients for 50% more price. So just understanding what you're buying and not just thinking, it says fertilizer, I'm sure it'll work.
That's great. So, Jason, we're kind of coming here. We're kind of rapid fire these 3 under the turf management beyond fertilizer sections. So, okay, we all know that fertilizers is okay. It's one piece of the puzzle now. I guess this would tie into Greg and I too. I mean, how does it tie into other turf management basics like mowing height and watering? So Greg and I are responsible for mowing height and obviously only watering our own lawns, but how does that all kind of tie in? Because we can actually really make the FERT guys look bad if we go through a drought period or something like that and I just butcher the lawn down, like I don't scalp, but there's some guys who take it low and then the FERT guy comes and sprays, the roots are really overexposed. I think that couldn't that fertilizer do some damage if the lawn's not properly irrigated?
Yeah, I mean, irrigation is not as important, I think, in our situation. Our grasses are fairly drought tolerant, but I definitely could. The homeowner needs to cooperate, or the mowing guy. I've always said I've got, and I would add mowing frequency. For our lawns, the lawns that are mowed weekly compared to bi-weekly, there's a substantial difference. Even on controlling the weeds, the weeds don't like lawn mowers, so you just mow them. It definitely helps, but also kind of rule of thumb is you don't mow off more than a third of the grass blade. So if you do more than that, you're going to probably stress out the turf a little bit, and it can make it look bad. One of the ways when we were playing the blame game, who did it? Was it the weed guy or the mowing guy? When I had a guy fire me a few years ago, I referenced this, but I'm convinced it was the mowing guy for a couple reasons. The neighbor, one, because I'm not him, so it had to be the other. But the neighbor's yard, I also sprayed the exact same thing on, and it looked perfect, and in his yard looked terrible. And I said, well, how's the mowing going? He said, well, the guy mows it every 2 weeks, which is not enough for our Bermuda lawns in the summer. And what happened is you could see brown straight lines through the lawn. And what we say is, insects and diseases don't draw straight lines. So if it's a straight brown line going through there, then it was a lawnmower did it. Basically this guy was scalping the lawn he told him cut it on number 2 every time. Well, like, number 2 doesn't work every time. I mean, you decide anyway. So if I don't know if that helps or not, I just think I need to recap the frustrations I had with that guy.
That's funny.
You feel better now?
Yeah, a little bit.
You've helped a lot of lawn people get started. You've helped a lot. What's tips that you can give someone to be able to start their business?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost like trying to learn a foreign language. I mean, you sort of have to get in there and be immersed in it a little bit. It can be intimidating, and rightly so. Obviously, different states, you're going to have to jump through all their hoops to get licensed. Some states are far more complicated than others. Fortunately, ours, you just take a test and pass it and pay them some money and then do your continuing education. But other states, you may have to have 3 years of college degree or 3 years experience. So
I think we do up here in Michigan because Jason, I kind of wanted to branch into the FERT game. I mean, I've been doing this 15 years, and Greg can tell you the last 5 years of my business, I'm overly ambitious. I have some sin and some pride get in the way. I see you have a Bible there in the back, guys. Hey, if you're watching this, looks like Jason's a man of faith. But I'm 34 now, and I just feel like it's just beating my back. And I'm like, I'd like to get in the spraying. But point being said, you got to work under a guy for 3 years and take a test. I don't think I'm that smart to pass a FERT test. So
it's frustrating. You got to work for 3 years, but I understand why they do. I'll say that on the positive notes, the states that require you to do that, typically, that's even a bigger barrier to entry. So if you can get on the other side of the barrier to entry, there's even less competition. Florida, Mississippi are like that here. I think you got to have 3 years experience. And what I've been told is the people that have their license, they're racking up because it's so hard to get a license that there's not much competition. So, but like I said, I made the illustration about a foreign language. If you got 5 yards or you even started on your own yard, then you start trying things, not trying. You need to find a plan and somebody that can just say, hey, do this. And just do what they say to do. Okay, but then you'll start making observations like, well, hey, I sprayed this. You told me to spray this and that weed didn't die. Why did this weed die and weed not die? And you'll start to understand why certain weeds die with one product and why other weeds I have to use this specialty product. And you'll understand the difference in a broadleaf weed and a grassy weed and a sedge, and why a sedge product will not do anything to a broadleaf weed and vice versa. So it's kind of one of those deals. You have to find somebody that can tell you what to do, start doing it, but then you're at that point, you're immersed in the culture and you're starting to learn and make observations. And within a year, I think if you're in it, you're going to make huge gains in your understanding of what you're doing.
That's perfect. Greg, what'd you have?
It's kind of interesting because I see it just as just separate from what you just said. Is I see lawns, and I got my clients coming up to me and saying, "Greg, what's wrong with my lawn?" And I'm looking at it, going, "I don't know if you have a mold, if you have a fungus, or what. How do you? How as a lawn guy can I know what the difference between a fungus and a mold is, and what's wrong with their lawn?" And how do you know? I usually say ask the FERT guy because he should know. And a lot of times I'm finding that, and then the FERT guy doesn't have a clue. I looked at it just as an example. Had a lawn guy had a pine tree in his lawn, and he kept thinking he had all these issues with his lawn. And I'm saying, it's your pine tree. I think it was just too much because needles, acid. Yeah. And I said, I think it's your pine tree. And he's got the guy coming out doing all kinds of treatments on his lawn. And I said, Charlie, cut down the pine tree. And boom, as soon as he cut down the pine tree, the lawn flourished. And but in my case, I'm looking at that, and the guy's telling him, "Oh, you got a mold, you got a fungus." It was the needles.
Yeah. Fortunately, I don't find that there's just like an unlimited number of problems with the lawn. It's more you see the same thing over and over and over again. So it's not like in the fungus, for instance. I mean, I see fungus in the lawn. A lot of times it's what we call dollar spot, which is little brown patches all over the lawn in the summer that comes when we have rain, and it's not a big deal. Occasionally you see what we call large patches, these huge brown areas that are a problem. But in those situations, again, just experience can help you understand if it was that an insect, was that a disease, what's going on there. And then for me, fortunately, I just had a mentor that even today, if I don't know what's going on, I'd take a picture. I'd text it to him. I say, hey, what's going on with this yard? And he's got like tons of experience. And if he don't know, he knows the PhDs at the university. So, I mean, eventually I can get access to a PhD at a university. I know everybody doesn't have that, but a mentor can help you. And it's not as complicated as it may sound. It's usually just weeds and fertilizer and kill it. And occasionally you run into something. But like I said, when armyworms hit, I mean, you say, well, did you happen to see thousands of caterpillars on your yard? You know, if the answer is yes, then you have armyworms. You know, if you saw one little caterpillar crawling across your back patio, then you just had one little caterpillar and then some other kind of caterpillar, you know, so it's not overly complicated.
Jason, we're parking the sprayer back here in the trailer as we're wrapping up. Pitch your classes, your website, your YouTube channel. Really, I guess, press this and make it known of like what you do, like what academies and courses you offer, because it's actually pretty cool. You offer a lot of stuff. I mean, I know jack squat compared to what Jason knows about spraying or how to run an academy for weeds. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of things. We host a conference and we did that a few weeks ago. My website's lawncarelife.com, and on YouTube I'm Lawn Care Life. That's where I mostly stay, and I try to make relevant videos. Sometimes the dumb videos get a lot of views, and I've done some dumb videos, but I try to do stuff that, like, if somebody watched this, they might actually learn something, even if it didn't get quite as many views. And then, I use that YouTube platform to sometimes, for people that want to start a weed control and fertilization business, they go to lawncarelife.com, and my main product I promote is the Weed Control and Fertilization Academy. And that's designed for somebody that was mowing grass or just got into the business and they're wanting to make the jump over to weed control. And how do I do it from everything, the business side, the marketing side, the equipment side, to actually what you spray on the yard and fertilizer and all that. But I tell people all the time, I get asked this, I don't recommend it for cool season people because I'm a warm season person. At some point, I need to collaborate with a cool season person and add that into the course. But for now, I typically focus on warm season lawns. But I got other stuff on there like pricing charts and mosquito spraying academy, which I did collaborate with somebody for that because I don't know if that. So those are my platforms, YouTube, and then my website where I sell those products.
Well, guys, he's got a really good presence on YouTube, and I've kind of lurked you, Jason, and kind of I watch you on and off. I mean, you've been on the platform for 13 years, and I just want to thank you again for getting on the show. Do you mind if we pray us out?
You want me to pray?
I mean, sorry, me, man. I talk about being early, guys. I'm an idiot. I didn't realize that. I thought Alabama was in like Eastern time zone. Greg, you'll laugh at this. I'm like, okay, we'll do 8 a.m. Eastern. Man, we should have bumped this like an hour or two later because man, I don't want to get up that early. But here, let me.
No, that was fine. I was glad. I'm happy to get an early start. I get up early. I was relieved to see that it was early.
Well, good. Well, that's great. Here, I'll pray us out quickly. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this opportunity to get Jason on the show. Lord, bless Jason, Lord, as he runs his business at home and then this kind of virtual online business. Just pray that Jason will just keep his eyes fixed on you at this upcoming year, and that you'll send him clients that need to learn how to fix their lawn. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Jason, thanks again, brother.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the opportunity.